Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. We're going to begin, and one of our guests, Heidi, who's just come off the stage, will join us in due course. But I'd like to welcome you and Rolf Abderhalden, who is the co-curator together with Heidi of the extraordinary piece of theatre we've just seen.
Thank you, William. Thank you.
And maybe before we get into the question of the particular piece, just a kind of bit of background, that Rolf and I met in 1981, 81,
That's
82?
right, 81, yeah.
We were both students at the École Jacques Lecoq in Paris, a theatre school. There's several people in the festival that have a connection to the school. Simon McBurney, who will be presenting work later on in the festival, was a student at the same time together with Rolf. Luc de Witt, who was one of the performers in The Head and the Load last night, is also a student from École Jacques Lecoq. And later on, maybe we talk a bit about acting from the neck downwards.
Yeah.
Okay? About different things. What is it that came out of that school that has influenced the way we work, or the way that this particular piece is made?
Yeah, so thank you so much, William, for your welcome, and thank you for being here now, after you should be drinking or outside with this nice evening we have here in Amsterdam. As William said, we were trained, if we can talk about the training, in this particular school of Jacques Lecoq, which was a very singular school, not for traditional training of actors or directors. There were all kind of people in this school, as William and I, coming from different backgrounds, dancers, painters, architects, writers. So, and Lecoq was insisting overall in the movement perspective of the different disciplines and the perspective of movement in life in general. This was his main interest, and he has been developing all his methodology specifically on movement. And many people thought at that time that because that school was not very known in France, but it was very well known abroad, all over the world. We were from for all the continents we were there. So many people thought it was kind of mime school, like Marcel Marceau, or just for mime, because movement was at that period where the language, the speaking theater was very strong, but it was just considered, the mute language was considered just as mime, pantomime. But actually Lecoq was focusing on a whole philosophy of movement as the moteur.
The driving force.
As the driving force of life, movement. And of course we couldn't get exactly this deep reflection on movement as a philosophy of life, and we were very interested in the movements that Lecoq was teaching us. But of course behind these movements, behind of this background of movement, there was this philosophy of life, how to keep life always there, always burning, always going on, always present.
I mean, in the Anglo-Saxon world, certainly the traditional way of doing theatre was to start with the text, the great writers, Shakespeare, from Shakespeare downwards. That you start with it, and from that it's an analysis of the text and techniques of performing the text, and with later techniques working out the subtext that is being expressed, and then the motivation of the actor, whole psychological motivation. And what I think what is clear, both in your piece and which is the way that we worked also in the piece that we've been doing here, The Head and the Load, is to say there is a sense of understanding of the world that is possible without that kind of analysis. That it's, you find your characters in what they are doing and how they are moving and how they occupy the stage. And here in a lot, you even had the dissociation, which was for me very striking, of a text that you read, or that you listened to, in my case, listened to and read in translation to understand all the radios, all the astonishing dictionary at the beginning of words which have a different meaning if you're in the upper class or in the lower class. That's a fantastic piece of language analysis that happens in that. But there's this wonderful other tableau that you're watching of this strange house, of this room, of the children in it frozen while it's going on. And even there where it's about no movement, it's stillness, but it's the separation of the words that, for me, became a very interesting part of the technique of the whole piece.
Yeah. Lecoq was not very much interested in psychology and all this kind of analysis. And I think we grew up, if we can say, in this school, out of this logic of psychology, and much more attentive and observing everything, all the details of life, in many, many aspects of life. I remember, and I think you can notice that in both our works, even if they are very different and they belong to different universes, how certain details are present. For example, there was an exercise, the dynamics of movement in the painting. So we had to go to the Beaubourg or the Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris and work in front of a Rothko, or work in front of a Bacon, or in the history of art, all the paintings, and we had to understand what was the dynamic, the forces behind, not just the form, but the forces. That was for me one of the main teachings, the difference between form and force.
I mean, it's interesting which are the lessons that and I teach drawing. If I take a drawing class, I almost entirely use exercises from the theatre school to teach drawing. I think it was about what is the origin of the impulse of a movement that's going to allow the finished movement to blossom and stand in front of you. So the exercise, I was very bad at it. We would go a week of colors. What is the movement of yellow? Is it a gentle movement? Is it an explosive movement? Is it still? How does it jerk? And I couldn't do that kind of kinesthetic.
I was very good.
You were very, I know you were. I know you were. I always either came with a gray or a dark green to show the movement. And all the people from Latin America came with yellow, with red. I mean, it's also very interesting because and this is very much about different traditions. In the Anglo-Saxon world, it's very difficult to talk about, to display emotion without a life-saving irony. Okay? So as soon as you say on stage, I love you, you've got to put inverted commas around it to say, I'm not really saying it, it's the character. And it was astonishing how with you and the other students, oh sorry, are you not hearing it? Okay, sorry. No, then I go cross-eyed. You put it down. Okay, I'll get closer to it. I'll take it out of here and I'll hold it. Is that better?
Oh.
Okay, I can talk like that.
Yes, that's better, actually.
It was always interesting to me that the people that came from a Latin background, whether it was Spain or Portugal or South America, had a much more direct relationship to expressing big emotions. I had to work in opera before there was a way of talking about big emotions non-ironically.
But sometimes with a very lot of cliches.
The big emotions.
Yes.
Yes, that's the danger.
Saying, okay, you're Mexican, but don't exaggerate that much. It's not that. Because it was also this kind of stereotypes behind our own.
There is a stereotype that can be there, but there's a kind of a wildness and exuberance that was in the show tonight that would be very difficult. It would be very, I did feel, okay, gosh, I wish we could do that, but we can't. All the silver foil and all the balloons popping and all of the things exploding was kind of a...
Perhaps it is a cliche.
I don't think
And
it's a
that's
cliche.
part of the decision.
It is.
Perhaps also. I understand what you mean, but sometimes we also play with this kind of images because we are aware, of course, that the repertory of images that we have.
I mean, there's things which I don't know whether it's something that comes into your head at all when doing it, or if you hate it if I make the association. But of course, as someone not from Colombia, my knowledge of Colombia before I met you and afterwards largely given through Marquez, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And there's no description of a children's brass band sitting unmoving in a room in any of his novels that I can remember. But when I saw it, I thought, oh boy, I've seen this before somewhere, and it's in a book that he meant to write but didn't ever write, of the children's brass band. And the whole way, it's so interesting that instead of a lateral movement, one's used to one scene and another scene coming in sideways, but to keep just pushing the diorama deeper and deeper. Was also a fantastic thing for me that you go from the room into the town in which the celebration was taking place, and beyond that into the dark jungle.
And you were expanding the traditional frame that we have to 50 meters. I mean, you were also...
So it was going more and more lateral. Yes.
Very impressive, also breaking, this traditional way of having very frontal, but that impressed me a lot in your performance.
But it's
this wide, so wide a frame, no?
But in your house, just to describe it, that the Mapa Teatro has its base in Bogota, in Colombia. Colombia is interesting. It's about the same size as South Africa, also 50 million people. I think the economies are the same size. While watching the performance, I kept on thinking, okay, we've got a huge number of problems, but at least our drug cannabis, which is the big South African drug that is made, has never been monetized to such an extent that it's been a big shaper of the politics, of the shape and the violence in the country, the way Colombia seems to have been so turned into this craziness that we saw tonight. But what I was describing is that the theater of Heidi and Rolf, Mapa Teatro in Bogota, is in a beautiful house from the 1890s,
Yes.
And it has courtyards and it's got mezzanine up levels, and the theater itself is excavated out of 3 or 4 rooms. One of them the audience sits, and it's an audience approximately the size of you here. That's what can fit in.
70 people.
70 people. And the next room has a glass wall in front, or it had for this production exactly as the first scene. And then when the curtain raised, you were in the room behind it, and then finally you'd seen almost all the way through the house. So presumably the space in which you are functioning and working and making the work also shapes what is.
Of course, yes, you're right, absolutely right. This is the size of the house is the performative size. So if every time we want to go abroad, somebody is interested to bring this abroad, we have to imagine how big this can be for more than 70 people, of course. So it's a big effort, and it's quite a big operation to figure out how this can be possible. And when we come back to this larger size, we have a very strange feeling that we're not at home anymore, which is good in a certain aspect, no? Because it pushes you to understand and to find, no, your place. But it takes time, no, to be again in this big format. You are not saying that this beautiful house is a ruin.
Oh, it's a ruin. Okay, is it a ruin?
It's very important.
Okay,
it
please
is a
describe
ruin.
it further, yes. But it is kind of a wonderful, it is. Okay, it does. You can imagine. Marquez
Yeah.
did describe a ruined big colonial house with different courtyards and wooden
Absolutely.
banisters upstairs, and one of the creaky floors at an angle that's falling down is where all the sewing of the costumes and the changing and everything happens. And there's a small coffee shop in the edge of a courtyard. It's a kind of magical place, which in a way is what you're showing also in the production.
Yeah, you're right. I think all the performances carry also the way of producing it. When you see the performance, I think you can feel how it has been produced. Not just as a performance, but also as a kind of economy. Everything in this house has been recycled. Everything has been reused 1 and 2 times and 3 times, and especially for this triptych, this is what you have seen is the triptych, and this is the condensation of 3 other performances. And so each part, so each cube, you have seen 3 cubes, one behind the other, belongs to one part of the triptych. So everything that has been used in one of the performances is used again, especially here in this triptych, as the rest, as the remain, as the vestige, the ruin of another performance. Actually, this is the ruin of the triptych. Okay. The triptych is a ruin. Voilà.
But again, so that gets to nothing, because what it is you're very aware of it as a kind of collage also, of fragments.
Yes.
That there are different things. You're in the children's room. There's this very strange puppet that's there for a moment and comes back much later, and then we're in the next room with a video of the carnival that's happened.
Everything has been used in the previous performances, no? Certain in one of the parts, other in other parts. Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting thing, because when we were working on Head and the Load also, that it starts with fragments that feel lively, which one recognizes, which one knows are important, without having written the argument or necessarily a script in advance. That would come later. I'm interested in yours, because there's a lot of dramaturgy in the particular text that you use in the shift between radio and music. How much is found along the way, and how much is written before you start working?
No, almost nothing is written before. We collect a lot of material, we make the research, we work a lot in archives, historical archives, newspapers, and we collect, as you do, we collect many things, but you use everything. When I see your layers of, this is an impressive collage. What you have seen is just certain materials, no? And as you say, this makes the dramaturgy as an act of the performative. It is something in movement. There is no dramaturgy previous, the staging, if we can say it like this, no? Everything is a montage, an operation of montage. The music, the visual, the scenography itself. We have ideas, intuition, and we work, of course, with these intuitions. But just when the material is there, as a fact, as a reality, as a concrete material, so at that moment then we start to put them together. Many times we have many heterogeneous materials, and we wonder how we are going to put this together, no? As many things that you have seen before, no? If you think about every part separately, you would say, this is a disparate, this is foolish, how to put these things together, no?
Okay, so that's the 2 things that I wanted to comment and link on those. One is about the stupidity, the necessary stupidity of making.
Yes.
Where you allow things which, even if you don't understand what they are, to have the benefit of the doubt and see what they become, and to put things that shouldn't be together, and actually believe that at some point some new meaning will come from them. The second thing I don't remember right now, but
Okay.
but
Regarding this,
oh
Heidi is much stronger. I have the benefit that we are two.
yes.
So.
No, I have the benefit that we were 23 or something.
Oh,
making
yeah.
many different.
Yes.
That was a question I wanted to ask you. The particular characters that are in it, the person who does that sort of rap song without a shirt on at the back, with the AKA, all the different names of the drug lord at the back. The man in the third level without a shirt, who does a very strong song.
Jago, yes.
And
The
then
third
the
one, yes.
and then the man with the pink feathers who plays the sticks and sings the song.
Yes.
There's a sense that it's not just roles that are written and then you audition actors and they perform them.
No.
Are these the people who also constructed those roles, or how does that work?
Yeah, actually, we not even speak about roles anymore.
Yeah.
We have just personalities or human states, like personalities that are strong, and for a reason that we not always know before, or almost never know before, come to meet us, and we meet them in the research or in the making, in the act of making, and then at the end we say, okay, we can work together, and of course there is nothing like an audition. It's more the encounter, and from this encounter we decide, well, what could be the dialogue, the possible dialogue. For example, Don Danilo, the old man, the musician, who tells his story for real. He was a musician of the Pablo Escobar's group in the 80s. He never used to sing. He was playing always the drums, and he was a drummer and directing the orchestra that he used to direct for Pablo Escobar. But here, we thought that the best way to take out his humanity was singing, through the singing. And this is how, we at the end we decide, and he chose the songs, so there is of course a contribution, a dialogue in this encounter. And also for Jaco is a rapper in Medellin, and he's the generation after the narco-trafficking generation who fighted against all this heritage violence especially in Medellin. So he used to compose his songs and to make a very activist, strong work. He's not an actor.
No.
He's not even a singer. He's much more composer and an activist in Medellin to fight against this violence of the comunas. So, but this personality for us was so strong and necessary for what we do that we invite him to be part of it. No?
And then at the end, Mayakovsky comes in.
Yes, this is, voila, Mayakovsky. What is Mayakovsky doing here?
But I think the question is always, how can one not do with Mayakovsky?
Yeah.
I mean,
At the end you say that.
there was a short play that Mayakovsky wrote very early on called Mayakovsky, A Tragedy.
Yeah.
Which has got crazy characters, a woman with 1,000 tears, a woman with 1 tear. It's got great images, and it's a play, but it's a kind of an unperformable play with Mayakovsky as one of the characters. And very often before I start a project, just to kind of like eating a healthy piece of food or something to clear one's head, a strong sorbet is to reread that play again.
Yeah.
And so how is it that Mayakovsky came into?
Mayakovsky came because there was something missing, the more we were going on and the more we were almost at the end of the process, the more we were feeling that something was missing. And Heidi found, she's very strong finding texts and materials, and she found this dream. Actually, this text is a dream, and is a dream made by Tabucchi, the Italian writer. And he wrote the text about the dream, the Mayakovsky's dream.
Okay, so it's a Tabucchi text, not a Mayakovsky.
Yes, no, it's not.
Because I was interested in Mayakovsky, and I had not recognized the style of Mayakovsky during it, so that's a relief to hear that's Tabucchi. Okay, which is also kind of wonderful. The sense of this as a kind of diorama, like a museum, the fact that you have this glass wall between the audience and the performance, made it feel for me so often like you were looking at those fantastic dioramas where you'd have stuffed animals and a painted backdrop of the jungle that they're in. So you're so aware of this kind of constructed but completely seductive world that you're invited into.
Yeah. Perhaps that was the only way for us to watch at our history without a distance in this display. Otherwise it would have been almost impossible to look at it, to look in front of it without this display. So it was working as a kind of distant frame, no, a distant box where to look at it without some distance.
So it looks either like a picture frame at one point or a Joseph Cornell box with all those different objects placed inside the box. And then obviously gets deeper and deeper, and so you're looking. But it struck me that also what that did to the sound. So you had the sound one place distance, that you'd had microphones inside the room playing outside, but you were kind of aware you weren't hearing it firsthand.
Yeah.
And that also, I think, was a very interesting, between the radio and that, it was such an interesting journey of sound-wise, backwards and forwards across the space.
That was something that we wanted to work, the different layers of proximity and distance, but also memories that are very far away that you can almost not listen to them, and some memories which are so strong, these kind of things. They were all related to finally the Museum of Memory, which is that we are building ourselves, and that the official history is building also for ourselves. No?
So I think talking about memory and building history, because it seems to be part of a project which feels very similar and very close to what we were concerned or very interested in, the project we were doing, that's also at the festival, which is to say, can one give a sense of history without using the conventional tools of history, which is narrative, an analysis, a completed analysis of an event, but we always understand that that is a provisional construction of a sense from fragments that are always there. And what your piece makes very clear is the fragments that we are having to put together ourselves.
Absolutely, yes. But also that history is a common fiction. Is a fiction, and we are building, we are part of this fiction, so that we are allowed also to produce, to be very active in this fiction. And perhaps this was something that we as artists, we can also assume, of course with a big responsibility, but I think this is part of our work.
No, I think it's more than we can assume. I think it's something that that is a polemic built into the very nature of the performance.
Yeah.
It's not simply saying this. Can we have a small place at the edge of conventional historians?
Yeah.
But saying this is actually a way of understanding the instability of stories, the fiction of history, which needs to be part of understanding our past. Good. I think that...
I don't know what happened to Heidi. She's still without...
I think it's fine. I think that's good. She's hiding behind the column.
Pero no la vemos.
Okay.
Okay, William, thank you.
Thank you, Rolf. Thank you so much for this.
And Heidi,
And
comes
Heidi,
for the applause.
Heidi, come for
Heidi,
the applause.
come for the applause.
Vieni qui, vieni qui.
Es más agradable para mí escuchar que hablar.
She has more fun hearing than talking.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, William. Thank you. Okay, we deserve a toast. Yes. Let's make a toast all together.
Sorry. One last thing as we go. So it's been, I think, 38 years, 37 years since we were at theatre school together. And our paths have sort of crossed. Different productions have been at different festivals, but it's the first time I've been able to see your work in the festival and you see my work in the festival. Yeah. And we should drink a toast to dear old Jacques Lecoq also. Thank you.